Think about how many times a day you run water over a kitchen fork or a chef's knife. We drop them in sinks and run them through dishwashers without a second thought. If those tools were made of plain iron, that daily bath would be a death sentence. When regular iron or steel meets water and oxygen, a chemical reaction starts immediately. The metal begins to oxidize, creating that familiar, flaky orange rust that will eventually eat away the entire structure. The reason your kitchenware survives the sink is a specific addition to the metal recipe. It's a hard, silvery element called chromium. When chromium is mixed into steel, it does something unique. It rises to the surface and reacts with oxygen first, creating an incredibly thin, invisible barrier. If the metal gets scratched, more chromium instantly reacts to heal the breach, completely blocking the water from reaching the vulnerable iron underneath. For this self-repairing shield to work, the steel mixture needs a specific minimum amount of chromium. Once the recipe hits 10.5%, the metal officially earns the title of stainless steel. This exact same invisible barrier scales up far beyond the kitchen. It is the precise property required to stop surgical tools from degrading in hospitals and protect the massive, complex parts that endure extreme heat and pressure in aerospace jet engines. Whether it's a skyscraper facade or a surgeon's scalpel, chromium provides the essential armor that keeps our modern, metal-dependent world standing firm against the elements. Because stainless steel is everywhere, you might assume the chromium making it possible is equally abundant. But the global supply is actually tied to a remarkably small geographic area. Global cities rely on a constant flow of stainless steel, yet the raw material is mined in a handful of isolated locations. One nation towers above the rest. South Africa's Bushveld complex contains roughly 40% of all known chromite reserves on Earth. Relying heavily on a single region creates a precarious bottleneck. A smooth flow of global trade requires that this specific area continues to output raw material without any interruption. If a labor strike halts the mines, or if the local power grids fail in that one corner of the globe, the resulting shortage quickly hits the production lines of every industry that needs rust-proof metal. Getting that material out of the ground is just the first step. Miners aren't pulling out shiny sheets of metal. They extract a rough, weathered rock called chromite ore. To become useful, that raw rock has to be transformed into an alloy called ferrochromium, a dense blend of iron and chromium that steelmakers can actually use. Turning raw rock into ferrochromium requires baking it in massive furnaces at blindingly high temperatures. This smelting process demands a constant supply of electricity. Because the power bill for running these furnaces is so steep, countries that can generate cheap, industrial-scale electricity hold a major advantage in the market. Once the ferrochromium is cooled and crushed, the vast majority of it sails east. China purchases more than half of the entire world's supply to feed the steel mills that build their sprawling cities and manufacture their export appliances. If construction booms and demand suddenly spikes, miners can't easily scale up. Building a new high-heat smelter takes tens of millions of dollars and several years of construction. Because this supply chain is rigid, any interruption causes a ripple effect. The cost of ferrochromium goes up, raising the final price tag on massive commercial skyscrapers, down to the kitchen sink. With so much global infrastructure relying on it, you might think chromium would be heavily traded on public commodity exchanges, right alongside barrels of crude oil or tons of copper. But average investors can't just log online and buy a chromium contract. Instead, it operates through closed-door agreements. Prices are negotiated directly between the mining operations and massive steel mills, locking in long-term contracts away from the public eye. If someone wants to invest in this market, they can't buy the metal itself. They have to buy shares in the diversified mining companies that dig up the ore, or the industrial manufacturers that turn it into stainless steel. Fortunately, there is a major safety valve that keeps this tightly wound market from breaking under pressure. Stainless steel is incredibly easy to recycle, resulting in endless piles of scrap waiting to find a second life. By melting down old refrigerators, discarded pipes, and bent utensils, steelmakers can skip the mining process entirely. This constant reuse of old chromium relieves the pressure on the mines and helps keep the global price in check. So, the next time you pick up a piece of silverware for dinner, consider the journey it took to get there. That perfectly smooth, reflective tool in your hand is the final result of rocks pulled from deep inside South Africa, blasted in high-voltage furnaces, and carefully blended into an invisible shield, all to ensure that our everyday world never succumbs to the rain.